Yes, good afternoon and welcome everybody. Welcome or welcome back to the Guyana Extractives Industry Transparency Week. And this workshop is very, very special. It is dedicated to journalists and journalism students. We have many people who are registered, so I think many of them will join just after their lunch is wrapped up. But we already have our esteemed presenter and conversation partner and expert here with us. So I'd like to introduce him and give a little bit of a context what to expect from today's workshop. The topic is pure reporting, the role of ethics in investigative and data journalism. And our guest is Dr. Gary Gould, news media production specialist from University of Ryerson. And as you know, nothing can end someone's career faster than an ethics violation. And a good journalist's work should always be above reproach. This is because one of the primary tasks of a journalist is to independently report the facts, and in doing so, hold people accountable. This training session today is designed to help you to do that by looking at the role ethics plays in how you investigate, research, and access data and effectively tell stories that people want to hear. And who could be a better instructor and conversation partner than Dr. Gary Gould from University of Ryerson? And I will give this over to him so he can get started on this very exciting workshop full of activities and discussions.
Thank you, Kitty, and welcome to all and our distinguished visitors and guests. We're glad you're with us. I have been teaching online for about a year and a half. I do teach, as Kitty mentioned, at Ryerson, and I also teach at Sheridan College in Toronto. So I teach news, journalism, camera, digital design, and I've been working in journalism since 1987, so older than some of you. And I have, it has been a great ride, a great job, and it's a great journey. But also since 1987, things have changed. Things are not the same as they used to be. The other thing too, which I'm excited about today, is that we are recording this just to make sure everybody's aware of that. And so just if you didn't want anything on the record, you're also welcome to send me an email if you have individual questions. Probably the best email is ggould@ryerson.ca, ggould@ryerson.ca. Kitty, maybe you can put that in the chat, and you're welcome to reach out to me privately if that would be helpful. What I want to do today is I want to walk you through some of the issues with ethics. Now, thanks, Kitty. I also just want to acknowledge today that I don't have all the answers. I don't know if anybody does. Probably nobody does. I also appreciate that some of you are working journalists and have been for many years, and have your own experiences. And I want to acknowledge that. And just to say, I'm not trying to tell you how to do things. I'm just giving you some things to look at, things to consider. And one of the other things I will recommend probably throughout the course of this afternoon is further training that you can do. There is a lot of material to cover in the next little bit. I'm planning to we'll take a few breaks in here so that it's not straight through. And I built this studio in my mom's basement, but her internet's better than mine. I do live in Toronto, but her air conditioning is not working today. So it is a little warm down here, but that is not a problem. The other thing that I have spent a lot of time in my career doing is traveling globally and working abroad. I actually had the privilege of working with Reina in Peru when I was doing some stuff for the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, TV network up here in Canada. And I have spent a lot of time traveling around the world. So I hope that I have a broader view, I guess, maybe is a way of putting that, because I've seen different places. You know, even this morning, I did some work in Nicaragua, and I woke up this morning, and I almost every day, I'm grateful I have a bed, you know. And I was thinking of my time in Nicaragua, how people live down there, and they don't have beds, most of them, or many of them, where I was working, and no refrigerator. And if I think it's hot here, imagine what it's like never having air conditioning. So hopefully that's made me grateful. And what I want to do is I have a slide deck that we're going to work through, and please, if there's questions, pop them into the chat. We'll get to them. And I want to talk to you. Actually, before we start, well, actually, here, let's put the slide deck up. And then this is the part I hate, but I will share my screen, and I will share this. You should see it now. And I'm going to start from the beginning, view from the beginning. So here we go. So this is what we're going to be looking at today, the role of ethics in investigative and data journalism. Again, one of the things that I think I can be best serve you with is to provide some resources that you can refer to later. These are free resources, and some I will just send you. The first thing I want to ask is, why did you become a journalist? And maybe that's something you can put in the chat. Why did you become a journalist? And you have to, I think for me, when I think about, let me see how I'm going to do this from the slide. Why did I become a journalist, and why did I get involved with journalism? Maybe there's some thoughts. Maybe what you can put is in the chat. If those of you that are journalists, maybe you can, what are some reasons that you decided you would get into journalism? Anybody? I hear some typing, but actually, let me just stop this. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll come back, and maybe we can do it this way. But yes, why did you become a journalist, if you are one? And I guess I should also ask, this isn't part of my presentation, but I'm like, are you glad you did? Is that something you regret? One of the things that journalism has done for me, and something I'm really happy about, is that I've been able to see the world, and meet people and tell people stories. And here's one from Jerry. Honest, accurate information is important for social and improvement action, and I wanted to be a change agent. I love that, an agent of change. We're going to talk a little bit about that this afternoon. Honest, accurate information. And Jerry, that is exactly what we want to be talking about today. And how do we do that? Now, I'm just trying to see if I might have to, this slide deck may not be as smooth as I'd hope, because when I share it, Kitty, I lose my my notes, which I need on this computer. So let me try this again. Because you might see all my slides, but today is all about transparency, and I'm not hiding anything. So let's see if I do this. Okay. The problem is when I went full screen with that, so you could see it full screen, and I couldn't see anything else. So we'll just leave it like that. Can you see my screen, Kitty? Can you?
Yes, we can. Yes,
but you see the slides on the side, right?
We do.
That's okay. I can live with that. So I think what we're going to do, again, we're going to talk over and over and over again about being transparent. And one of the things that I appreciate about journalism is the opportunity to tell stories. Jerry, you had it right on the nose, right? But we live in a different world. When I started in journalism, things were very different. We had newspapers, right? And newspapers were, people read them. There was a good readership. People would wait for the newspaper to come out to get the news. That's how we started in news. There was TV news, but you'd wait till noon or 12 o'clock. And so we did have TV, right? And that was really the people that told our news. And of course, I don't want to forget our radio friends. There was television, radio, and newspapers. And the problem is, not the problem, it's not a problem. I've worked in technology my whole career. And one of the things that I've learned about technology is technology is not really always your friend. And like today, right? So I thought I had this figured out, but clearly no. So if I go full slide with my PowerPoint, it takes my whole screen away. And that's a problem. But that's okay. So we learn to adapt. And one of the things that we have realized is in today's world, we have so many things that are different, right? We have all the digital outlets and medium. mediums. So where TV and newspaper and radio, we used to have gatekeepers. We used to have big organizations. When I worked for CBC, we would send a crew. When I went down to Peru and was working with Reina, we had, there was 4 of us on that crew, right? We had a sound person, and then I did the camera, and then we had a producer, and then Reina was our specialist on the ground. And actually we had several others that came and went. We had our friend Gloria in Peru that was very helpful to us, or in Lima, and others throughout the journey that we took together. But things have gotten smaller. Technology has shrank and gotten cheaper. So whereas before a camera was, a decent camera was, $5,000 to $10,000, your cell phone can now shoot 4K, which is a lot of resolution and certainly broadcast quality for whatever the price of your cell phone. It's in your pocket. So we've gotten rid of the bigger groups. And so now if you have a website or a smartphone and social media, one person can disseminate a lot of news. And yesterday, Honorable Minister Joseph Hamilton talked about the importance of training. And I completely agree with that. And one of the things that he said was that you have to have skills in more than one area. You cannot be just a one-skilled person for numerous reasons, not the least of which is as the environment changes, you don't want to be left behind. You don't want to be left behind. And so now we have to deal with things, right? We have to deal with Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. And, you say, well, do those things really count? I had one student who I taught at Ryerson, and he was doing some small videos. Friends were watching it. He had a YouTube channel, but maybe 100 people were watching it. Then he went on TikTok during COVID. And I don't know, somebody watched his video and shared it. Some celebrity liked his thing. And suddenly he had 1 million followers. And I'm not kidding you. Went from like 100 to 1 million, like very quickly. And then creative artists out of New York City hired him or signed him. He got an agent, and boom, suddenly you're famous, right? Like Justin Bieber, right? There's incredible power in the internet. There's incredible power in the ability to, if I wanted today to say something, I can put it online. Something that you won't know about me, but when I was a kid, I've always loved video. I always loved television. And I had this dream to create this content, this visual content. I remember writing when I was a kid, I wrote to the local TV station, and I said, like, what do I need to do to start a TV station? I thought, well, I could do it, right? And I remember the person was kind enough to write back, but was pretty sharp in their comments to a kid. Basically, like, what are you thinking? There's like, not in those exact words, but a television station is very expensive. You need a multi-million-dollar transmitter and electricians and engineers, and no chance, kid, basically is what they're telling me. However, if you wait long enough, suddenly the internet actually gives me more exposure than I would have ever gotten through a TV station. One of the things I have done in my travels is I review places. So I do travel reviews, and recently I joined the ranks of Google Images. I started working with their maps, Google Maps. And in the last 2 weeks, my photos have gotten 2 million views. 2 million views in the last 2 weeks. 2 million views is a lot of people looking at your stuff. And it's actually more than what the local news gets here in Toronto. Even our national news doesn't get 2 million views. And so me, in my mom's basement, right, I can actually have a platform that will allow me the opportunity and the potential to reach millions of people. The other thing that it does too is it doesn't, news used to be localized. Like if I don't know where you live, but in the past, if you didn't live in Toronto, you never saw Toronto news. Well, this TV behind me now, it has Roku on it, and it allows me to see global news anywhere. Or if you have cable, you can do that. But if I go on the internet, I can actually now look at news from all over the world, because a lot of stations are now streaming their news. So I can watch, anyway, pick a country, pick a city. It was interesting too, because this year I was teaching a course where we were interviewing government officials they were giving out money, and they were talking about the changes in the magazine industry in Canada. And though printed magazines are falling into disrepute, or they're just not printing them like they used to because everybody's buying digital, they said the plus side is, instead of having a Canadian audience, let's say a magazine like Canadian Geographic, you can look at it all over the world. So things have changed. And so you have a lot more people speaking. There's a lot more voices in the room. And with that comes danger, because what you get is first of all, a lot of contradictory news. You get a lot of things that are not true, straight up not true, right? Some of it's biased, but some of it is straight up not true. Now, fake news is something that has, when I grew up, that did not exist. Well, it probably existed, but we never called it that. We've heard a lot of that in the last 4 or 5 years, mostly through the States, coming out of there. Now, the Ethical Journalism Network defines fake news as it's a term used by politicians to describe news they find disagreeable. So what they're doing, they are attacking the veracity of the content. Oh, that's just fake. Now, I'm going to tell you something else, a personal story about my mother. Before I started this, as I said, I'm in my mom's basement. I don't live here, but I work out of here. So I went up to see if she was okay. So I got her some water and some lunch. And my mother has got memory loss, whether it's dementia or something else, we're not sure, but she forgets things. And it's incredibly frustrating because she will make a mess in the living room and then she'll say, who made this mess? And I said, well, you did, Mom. I did not. You're a liar. So the last, 3 to 6 months, she's gotten quite bad. She calls me that a lot. Like if she does something and I say, oh, well, you just told me that. I didn't. You're a liar. So she's attacking my integrity and doesn't believe me, right? And it's very frustrating because how do you possibly help somebody who doesn't acknowledge the issue? So fake news has really hit our industry hard. It's hit it hard because people believe it. People have come to actually believe that, yeah, this is fake. And it's found a lot of traction in the mainstream media. And the problem too is then we get into this situation where, let me move my slides up. I've got this little thing here. This is almost what we're into now, right? Where you have so many different unconfirmed, unverified platforms such as social media. People are now listening to unverified sources and they take it as truth. And the other thing the internet has done is given more people voices and they have a big audience, right? And Facebook doesn't help and other things as well, because a lot of stuff people just say it and there's no verification. There's no gatekeeper. There's no editor or editorial team that says this is just not publishable. And there's a lot of recklessness out there. It's almost like the Wild West in some ways, right? And many traditional news agencies are being accused of being fake news, which really shakes our industry to the core, right? And financially, it's been tougher too. People are not buying newspapers anymore, which there's no revenue. So newspapers are trying to reinvent themselves because you need money to survive. So as newspapers shrink and the voices in the room get louder from social media, you get a lot of dis and misinformation. And so, and this, by the way, you say, what does this have to do with the extractives industry? Everything, because our job as journalists is to be accurate, whether I'm telling you how many straws are left in the box, or we're talking about a mining issue. All of these things speak to, I mean, my mother once said to me, what's your honesty worth, right? And I don't know, all of us have probably had this situation where you go into a grocery store and they give you too much change back. And they give you too much change. And do you keep the change or do you return? Hey, you gave me too much, right? And then this has happened to me. I remember when I was a kid, we went to Disney World, and I'm confessing this, and if Disney ever watches, maybe they'll send me a note. But as I remember it, I gave the person this was a long time ago, I gave them $5, but they gave me change from a 20, as I remember the story. So I got $15 back, right, from my 5. And at the time I knew it was wrong, but I didn't say anything. And so what was my honesty worth? $15. That's what my honesty is worth, right? And that's where it begins. Now, I have changed my mind about that. I regret that and would do it differently and have done it differently ever since. If someone gives me too much change, I give it back. My integrity is not worth it. I'll tell you another story, and I won't mention names. When I worked for CBC, I worked for one of the top journalism current affairs program. And I remember I was in the bathroom once, and I heard one of our top journalists talking to someone else in the washroom. And they were bragging about how they just sold their car. And they said the guy had a problem with his axle, like it was all squeaky and noisy. And so he took it to the mechanic. The mechanic said, this will be thousands to fix. And the guy was going to get rid of the car anyways. And so he said to him, can you just stuff it full of bananas so that the noise goes away? And the guy says, yeah, I can do that. So this top journalist stuffed it full of bananas and then sold the car. Now, interestingly enough, you think, well, that's just a car. No, it's not. Many years later, I was not working for that company, and that journalist fell into a lot of trouble with some stories they had done. There was a lot of public outrage, and I think he wound up losing his job. It starts with $15 at Disney World. It becomes ripping off people with a car, and the next thing you're making stuff up, right? And the problem is, okay, so disinformation is false information knowingly shared to cause harm. So disinformation is when we just, you know, it's just generally not true, and I know it's false. Misinformation is false information that's shared with no intent to harm. So misinformation is like, well, I didn't know that, just innocent stuff, but it still does damage, right? And the problem is our mainstream media is no longer the gatekeeper to filter fact from fiction, as you see there in that slide. And so the integrity of the news business is under attack. So if somebody said to me, hey, Gould, you've been dishonest, the answer is yes, I have been dishonest. And yes, I should have, maybe I'll send Disney $15 back. I don't know. It's probably worth about $300 nowadays in today's money. But I made a choice as a child that I learned was the wrong choice. And did it make a big difference? I don't know. To me, it did, because then what's my honesty worth? $15, not anymore, right? And I have changed my attitude towards that and my action too. So what we want to talk about is the integrity of the news is under attack. Public confidence is falling, and trust needs to be rebuilt, because we live in a world not only of fake news, but alternative facts. Oh, that's just a different way of looking at it. There's something called relativism. I studied that. I have a PhD, and one of the things I studied in philosophy was relativism, right? Everything is relative to something else. No, certain things are fact. Certain things are fact. If the stove is hot and I touch it, this I also did as a kid. You're learning lots about me today. So there you go. It's like therapy. But as a child, the stove was hot. My mom said, don't touch the stove. But we had the elements that were like circles. I thought, wow, that's really beautiful because it lights up glowing red. Of course, I had to touch it, right? So the fact was it's hot. Relativism plays no, I burn mine. If you touch it, you'll burn yourself. And that's what happened, right? And so this is the thing too. There are such things as facts. And one of the things when we talk about data journalism is there's numbers and there are facts. And this is the thing. So what we want to talk about, I want to give you some tools for the, did I spell that right? Modern journalism. Yep, journalists. So, and what we're going to do is with our tools, we're going to build a little table with the foundations. We're going to look first at investigative journalism. Then we're going to look at more specific ethics to data journalism. But I want to talk about number one is precision or precise. And precise journalism is something based on the exactness of your words, the accuracy of your facts, which is what Jerry mentioned earlier, accuracy, and things that make your work concise. Now, one of the things that I really love is, as a kid, if I didn't go to TV and journalism, I would have loved to have been a detective. I just love investigation. Maybe that's why I like investigative journalism. I like researching. That's what I like about doing my PhD. I like digging, right? And our friend Raina is an archaeologist and has spent time in her life digging. I love digging. You know, when I was a kid, we had a little detective agency in our neighborhood with lots of stuff as a kid, right? And when I was checking out at Amazon recently, they said, hey, maybe you'd like this. And so I don't know if you can see my little picture. This little Pinkerton badge, look at that, for $10. I said, I'll buy that for $10. This little detective agency's badge. And it's, you know what? It's just a fun thing. And it reminds me that we are, as journalists, we are detectives. And there was a show when I was a kid, Dragnet. And the officer used to say, just the facts, ma'am. People go to a crime scene and they would try to give other things. He just wants details. Just give me the facts. And that is the thing as journalists we are supposed to do. You are an investigator, right? So you want it to be precise. You are dealing with a precision business. And you see that too. And if you watch a lot of legal shows, you'll see there's, they also, just the facts, tell us the facts. And So facts are, this is really where we get more into the extractive industry, because if you're looking at numbers, one of the things that we see is volumes and numbers, and there's a lot of like hard data involved with the extractive industries, and numbers are part of the reporting. And so your job is to make sure, first of all, and we'll talk about this later as well with the data journalism part, but always double check your numbers, right? Always double check your numbers. Because the one thing with today's society is if you do not, others will. Because in the past, we actually, let me actually just stop sharing just for a minute, just so I can go back to the full screen. Let's see. So one of the things with the with what we're doing is fact checking. And I, you know, when I was doing my PhD, and Raina has a PhD as well, and some of you all might as well, or any kind of graduate work, I was so grateful for the internet. Because, or just online, anything. I could order a book from Arizona, it would come. I could find PDFs of stuff online, and it was beautiful. And I really appreciated the use of the internet. I was thinking, imagine doing a PhD when there was no internet, when you had to go to a library and get a book and sign them out. And I taught at Oxford for 13 summers, a journalism program there. And I remember going to the great Bodleian Library, and some of you have been, at a reader's card there, and you can't even sign out books from the Bodleian. You could there was photocopiers, but you'd have to write stuff out. And what a different world. And the thing is, with facts nowadays, you're not the only one that have the facts. So maybe in the past you'd get a hard copy from, I don't know, pick something, right? And so, like anything, like a source, they'd say, oh, here's our latest numbers. Well, you decide if you're going to print them or not. And if somebody wanted a copy, they'd have to kind of order it. And like, but nowadays, a lot of stuff's just, you find it online. Like, what are the latest numbers? Boom, everything is online. And it's very important when you talk about accuracy, is to always double check the numbers and treat every fact the same. Can you corroborate what is being said? What is the background of the story? Who's the main players? If somebody gives you the facts, like what's behind their motivation in giving it to you? And the other thing is, always go to the source, right? And what's really important too is, when you're reporting, is you want to let the people know where the sources are. You want to name the source, or name the people that are involved in giving you that information. And also use more than one source. You want to interview people with opposite opinions. You want to look at different things, and you want to, can you verify what is being said from more than one angle? And again, this is about the idea of being a digger. As a journalist, you are going to be a digger. You know, when I was in England, I told you I was teaching there. I love artifacts. I always have. So this is an artifact that I bought when I was there. I don't know if it's in focus. I think you can see that. And this is an ancient lantern, right? It's a little lamp. It's sort of like that lamp of education you see them use. So you put the oil in here, and it's broken now, but you could see that the oil would be in the bottom, and there'd be a hole here, and there'd be a wick, and they would light it, and this would be their version of an early flashlight. So you think on first look, you think, oh, it's a terracotta lamp. But then the woman that was working in the antiquities store said to me, actually, she said, it's an early fake. And I said, what do you mean it's an early fake? She said, well, I said, is it not the age you claim it is? She said, no, it's that old. But she said, if you look inside, because it's broken, you can actually see how the inside color is darker than the outside, right? And what she told me, she said, in ancient times, the terracotta was the expensive. That was sort of the A brand, as you were. That was like Gore-Tex, or whatever you want to call it. It was like everybody wanted terracotta because it lasted longer, it held the heat better, whatever. It was a better product, but it was more expensive. And so what disreputable people would do is they would take like a clay, they'd make these out of clay, but then they would coat them either in terracotta or paint them so that it looked like terracotta. So when you went to the market to buy it, people would say, oh, it's terracotta, you know? And, you know, there's a modern version of that up here. I was in, where was I? I was recently, it was Laos. I was in Laos. And I was on the street market, and if you've ever been there, there's a lot of stuff that's not it's not very touristy, and everything there is sort of locally made. So I bought this little elephant on the street. I paid $2 American for it, and I thought, oh, beautiful little carved elephant. So this is great. Well, then I went down to, we had a fair in Toronto, and I went there, and there was booths from different countries, and in that Southeast Asia, they had a whole bunch of these. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of carving. And the person selling them said, no, they're made out of resin. I said, what do you mean? I thought they were wood. He said, no, they're actually resin. And so then I went and looked and scraped the foot off, and sure enough, it's just some kind of resin mold. It's not even carved, right? So I felt I was getting a carved elephant, but I wound up getting, which is fine. They're welcome to the $2. It made me laugh, and good for them. But this is the idea here. As a journalist, you want to get to the core. You don't want to just look at the outside and say, on first blush, it's a terracotta lamp. No, it's actually not, right? Now, I don't know how you can tell in real life if it's a terracotta lamp, if you have to actually smash it or whatever. But here's somebody in ancient times got ripped off, right? And then they sold it to me. So your job as a journalist is to dig and keep digging, right? And make sure, don't, really almost trust nobody, right? Like, just take nobody's word for it, right? Because you need to find out for yourself, because if you get called to account and somebody starts questioning it, then you have to be able to defend it and say, well, I didn't get it just from one source. I heard it from more than one source. For example, press releases, right? That's somebody sends you a press release, and maybe you're on a deadline and you're trying to get a story out. You can go, well, this is an easy story. I'll just rewrite the press release. Don't ever do that. And I'm not talking about wire copy. No, those of you that work in journalism know what I'm talking about. Wire is coming from a verified source, and you're able to, with people who have training. That's the other thing. People have training on how to be a journalist, but don't just rewrite something. So one of the things, and I could be wrong, is there are, in my perception, at least, of the extractives industry, is there's a lot of money in that industry. Now, I could be completely wrong, but my limited experience with it seems like, because it's expensive, right? It's expensive to buy the equipment and dig out the stuff, but then the payoff's pretty good too, right? If it's $1.30 a gallon, and in Canada is what it's selling for now, right? And and again, maybe I'm wrong, but anybody that I knew that my neighbor's dad, when I was growing up, worked for Inco, which is a big Canadian mine, right? And was fine. So when you get a press release, don't think, oh, they must know what they're talking about. They're presenting that information from a particular angle, and your job is to read it and then pull out stuff that you want to verify, and check stuff that's verifiable, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about this with data journalism later on this afternoon. But the idea is, when you are looking at information, because a lot of times, and this is, I also should be very clear too. I like people that work in public relations. I teach at a journalism school, and a number of my students have gone into public relations. Is there anything wrong with the public relations industry? I would say no. I think it's reasonable. Like, it's actually good to have, because it's a great starting place as a journalist. So if I go to a company, whether it's an extractives company or someone else, McDonald's, let's say, if I have a problem, they have people that are trained to deal with the public. It's the public relations. Now, of course, they are taking it from, actually, it's really funny. I was riding the subway one time in Toronto. We have a subway, a metro, and a woman that I had gone to high school with, Christine, I ran into her on the subway, and we were talking, and I said, oh, what are you doing? She said, I'm doing public relations with McDonald's, of all places. And I said, oh, no, that's interesting. And actually, one of my former students went on to be the head of McDonald's media relations, or whatever they call it, department. But I remember at the time, McDonald's was under a lot of pressure because their boxes were styrofoam, and people were like, it's not good. They don't ever break down, and they're terrible for the environment. But I remember this friend of mine was giving me the McDonald's line. I said, oh, what do you think? She says, oh, no. She tried to explain why it's better. It's a good product, and it helps that industry. So she was clearly presenting it from the plastic side. Interestingly, and I don't eat McDonald's burgers. Well, I love their small, anyways. But I had a Whopper this week with or a McDonald's burger this week with a friend of mine, And it was not in a plastic box, it was in a paper box. And I made note of that. I thought, oh, they're still using paper, because years ago, the public pressure on them said, no, we don't like the styrofoam. We really want something more biodegradable. So even though the PR department was saying, no, it's fine, people knew better. So again, a press release is not, and by the way, not just a press release. Let's talk about a press conference. So a press release, you get it emailed to you and you can look through it. A press conference is far more um, alluring, is maybe the right word. You go and there's food, maybe nice food, some sandwiches and some drinks, and you're like, this is really nice. And so then they give you their line, what they want to do. You get, maybe if you're doing a TV piece, you get some clips from their person. Don't sell out for a sandwich, right? Think about me and with my story. It's your honesty is, your integrity is worth more than $15. I have one friend who's a hardcore journalist. He won't eat any of that stuff. He won't eat his sandwich. He won't eat anything. And I'll tell you something else. Walmart, I'm sure if you've never been, you've heard of that company, one of the world's largest companies. Well, I know people that have dealt with Walmart with their buyers. If you are a Walmart buyer and you go to a supplier, you are not allowed to take anything from them, not even a cup of coffee. So if I go to let's say I'm Walmart and I go to Joe's Tire Company and we're buying tires from Walmart, and I walk in, it happens to be lunchtime, and Joe's Tire has provided a lunch for me while we have our meeting, because I'm buying tires to sell through Walmart. If I eat that sandwich, I have to leave money. I actually leave them money to pay for the meal. Here's my, Walmart has a very strict policy. They will fire you. I mean, at Christmas time, if people send you gifts, you send them right back, because Walmart knows they do not want their buyers to be in any way beholden or connected to this company. Hey, Joe Tires gave me, a $100 gift card for Christmas. I feel a little bit better about them. And I don't think Joe Tire is trying to bribe them. It's just business, and thanks for helping us, and we appreciate working with you. But Walmart's like, no, you can't take that. And the other thing is, if you ever go to any Walmart head offices, they look just like the store, the same ugly paint. It's very basic, because their idea is, we're here to make money. We're not going to spend it on wallpaper, and we want to give people better pricing, and we're not going to have you sell out because you have lunch every day at Joe Tires. And that's Walmart. And for heaven's sakes, as journalists, we need to take the high road. Don't sell out for a sandwich. Don't just say, well, I'm just going to rewrite this press release. It's not a bad place to start. And some of it's, pretty benign. It's like, maybe it's a nonprofit organization and they're doing something. You're like, you know what? We need a light story. That's fine. And there's no real harm in it. But just be very careful. And the other problem is, we live in a 24-hour news cycle. That's not a problem. It's a change, a 24-hour news cycle. Before, you used to do, and we do a 12 o'clock for television, do a 12 o'clock lunchtime, and then you have a 6 o'clock news and then a late news. And in newspapers, like you'd have all day. You'd have an early edition and then you'd have a later edition, right? But nowadays, it's not like that, right? People know, hey, I heard something's happening, and people want to know right away. So there's this real pressure to put stuff out faster. And the problem is, putting out stuff faster means you can't always fact check stuff. You cannot verify stuff. And it's a problem, because fake news gets out there. Things that are not true get sent on air, especially live TV where there's an event going on and you're standing there just speculating. I will tell you straight up, never speculate. Never speculate. It'll always get you. Just say, we don't know. We just don't know. And of course, never report facts that you know to be not true, and never or make up quotes. I teach at a journalism school, and it's a problem with some of our first years. I've heard them say they just make quotes up. They're supposed to go out and do street interviews, and they're like, I'm not doing that. I feel uncomfortable with that. And they make it up. And again, it's like me at Disneyland, right? Taking too much change back, right? That's not honest, and it will come back to haunt you unless you change your ways, right? Unless you change your ways, and hopefully, I think I have. I want to talk to you briefly about Janet Leslie Cook. She's an American. She was a former journalist, and she won a Pulitzer Prize in 1981 for an article she wrote for the Washington Post. The Post is a huge newspaper. Democracy dies in darkness is their tagline, and I love the Post. But here's a big paper, and she publishes a story. You can look it up on Wikipedia, but the idea, she makes stuff up about this little kid. There was a story about drugs, and she was saying how this one kid she found, I think the kid was 12 or something, and so she claimed that the parents were drugging this kid. It's 1980. Yeah, she wrote a profile on the life of an 8-year-old heroin addict, and she describes it in really, she's a very detailed writer, so it was really believable. And what happened is the story took off. People were like, this is terrible. Like, some kid's parents are giving this kid heroin so that he's to keep him in line. And then Washington Mayor Marion Barry at the time, who I think also fell in disrepute later on, but they began on this all-out police search to try to find this kid. And finally, they claimed that they did find this kid, which they hadn't. And then they said the kid had died, but he really didn't, because he never existed. And anyways, eventually, someone else dug into the story and found it was all made up. And, what happened was, a smaller newspaper, the Toledo Blade, Cook used to work there. Anyways, they read her notes, and they felt there were some discrepancies. And so they went and investigated further, and they found out that their academic, she lied about her own credentials, her own academic credentials. And so she wasn't just lying about this story. She made, lying about a master's or whatever else it was. And eventually she had to give up the Pulitzer Prize, which, as she should have. And she was discredited, right? She resigned and returned the prize, but she went from here to, she lost her credibility and was out of the business, really. And the thing too, you have to remember is, just keep going, be good at what you do. One of the things that I do is I produce the video. I work in television journalism, and I do every year, I work for the National Newspaper Awards in Canada, and I do the videos for them, right? Help them with that. And there was one reporter, Toronto is a fairly large city, and then we have much smaller cities around our province. That's Canada has a number of provinces, but there's a smaller town called St. Catharines. It's not huge. It's a smaller town. Anyways, there's a reporter there. There's a newspaper there, and every year, this one reporter from this St. Catharines paper, this little tiny paper, just every year I've gone, this person has won an award. A phenomenal reporter. Just banging away at this little newspaper, not a lot of resources, but he's good at what he does and spends his time. Well, I just saw recently, he just got a job with the Toronto Star, right? So he's going to start working for them. Basically, you reap what you sow, right? If you reap, or if you sow lies and deception, you will reap discreditation. And some of you, let's talk briefly too about photojournalism, right now, because I teach photojournalism. And one of the things, we have guidelines in Canada. The basic idea is with a photo, if you're going to publish it as a factual photograph, you are not allowed to manipulate it. You cannot. You can crop it. You can adjust the brightness level on it. You can adjust the color. Anything you can do in the dark room, you can do to a digital picture, but you cannot Photoshop stuff out. You cannot flip things, like you cannot change the picture, right? If there's dust or dirt in the, you can do some fixing like that, but you cannot do that. And I've heard stories of very famous people just losing their way and losing their credibility, because the problem, I think, with success is you want to, you want, if you do well, you want to win again. It becomes like an addiction, right? And there was one photographer, you've probably seen his picture. He did the famous photo of, I believe it was an Afghani girl, right? And the problem was he wound up starting to manipulate his other pictures and got into trouble and was discredited, because as a photojournalist, you're supposed to just take the picture as it is. And that's the thing with journalism as a reporter, is you want to make sure that what is in your story is 100% factual and is provable, right? So double check your story, right? All All right, so it's 2:15. We're going to go about another 20 minutes, then we'll take a break if that's okay. Just to give you an idea, and I think I can probably get through most of the rest of my slides here. And as I said, we'll move through it fairly quickly. So let me just actually go back to sharing that. So
And while you're
I
doing that, Gary,
yeah,
there is a
you have some questions,
question. Yeah, there was
please.
a question a while ago. Yes. In Canada, are there newspapers, journals, reporters respect to the oil and gas sector that you would recommend to read?
I am not aware of any, but that doesn't mean there are not any. I have a student that works for the Canadian Pacific is a railroad, and I think they have some oil and gas holdings. They publish a magazine because he was their magazine editor. Um, I don't have that knowledge. I don't have that information that's specific to that. Um, so the answer is I don't know.
All right.
Uh, the answer is probably there is. And this is the thing too, the public relations company, like agent or the public relations departments will often produce either a newsletter or something or an update, or this is what's happening in our company. But again, too, when you get an, years ago when I was doing my PhD, I did research on Disney. So I bought Disney stock so I could get the stockholders report. But again, the stock report is not, it's not a journalistic piece of material. It's written from a business point of view. Look how great the company's doing. You should keep investing and you should feel good about your money. And they show you numbers, good and bad. But again, it's really glossy and it's kind of generally they want you to feel good about the company. My grandmother used to own shares in a grocery store. And at their stockholders meeting, first of all, there was a fantastic meal. They would give everybody this giant dinner. And then when you left, they'd give you bags of groceries, right? So, it was the best stock she ever owned because she got all this free food over the years. And she felt pretty good about it. You're not going to vote against the president if you're eating a steak dinner and going home with 2 bags of groceries, generally. And again, too, as journalists, you want to make sure that you don't sell out for a bag of groceries. And it's hard. It's very difficult because the problem is, I think, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure to, toe the line. So fact check everything. And then when we get, so precision is important in our facts. We want to make sure that so sources matter, fact checked everything, be transparent, tell people where the facts are. If you don't know something or if it's not verified, you can say that as well. You just have to be very, very clear with your audience, and you never report things that are to be untrue or heavily biased, right? Like maybe it's something that's coming from a company that you just don't really believe it. If you don't believe it, people won't believe it. And then very quickly, you will lose your integrity as a reporter, right? So again, the next thing, is unbiased. We want to be unbiased as much as we can. Look at all sides of the story. Like, don't just say, okay, this is one thing that we're going to look at. And is it possible to be completely objective? And I don't think it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you I edited this video together from 2 clips. One is on objectivity in journalism, which is kind of just this little fun thing that I liked. But then the second one is a longer clip from Dan Rather, who I believe was a person of great integrity during his career, and really cared about his work. So let's just do this. It's 7 minutes and 24 seconds long, but I think it's worth watching. And again, this is something that I've edited. The first one is from Carl Azuz, who did it for CNN, and it's a bit more fun. But part of it is, as a journalist, you need to recognize that we all bring something to the table in terms of our own the way we see our world. So let's go here, optimize, share screen, and you should see that, and this should play.
If your goal is to stay neutral on controversial topics, there are two things you got to keep in mind: balance and weight. Think of it like lifting a pair of dumbbells. If you want a balanced workout, you need them to weigh the same. On CNN 10, we want to keep our coverage like our diet, balanced. But back in my day as a writer, which I was before I was on camera, I was given an incredibly valuable lesson by an executive. She said, don't just balance every controversy. Make sure the different sides are weighted the same. For instance, let's say you're doing a crucial undercover expose on the breed of dog that makes its owners happiest. If you devote a minute and a half to Chihuahuas, extolling all the big benefits of the smallest dogs, and then you spend 15 seconds saying that Great Dane owners are howling in protest, you might say the story is balanced. After all, it has more than one perspective, but it's not weighted the same, dog. You've given 90 seconds to one position and 15 to the other. You've given one argument a leg up, so to speak, on the other. So to cover something objectively, you'll want to try to give the opposing sides equal time, or at least cover their opposing points equally. Now let's take a topic that's slightly more serious, like World War II. Shortly before that conflict broke out, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain declared there would be, quote, peace in our time with Nazi Germany. But even then, that statement was controversial in the British Parliament because another Briton named Winston Churchill had been warning that Germany was building up its military in preparation for war. Covering Chamberlain's side and Churchill's side would have been a way to objectively explain to a news audience what the controversy was all about. Their two perspectives were directly opposed to one another. And as far as who was right and who was wrong goes, well, history sorted that out. So fast forward to today. Let's say a new law is proposed in Congress. Everyone will agree on that, right? You could cover the who, what, when, where, why, and how of it, but these are highly emotional and opinionated times we're living in. And the moment you include an opinion about the proposal is the moment alarm bells should ring in the head of an objective journalist. Like most congressional proposals, some will love it and some will hate it.
So it's up to you, dear reporter,
to make sure you talk about the love and the hate, the good its supporters say it'll do, and the bad its opponents say it'll do if you want to stay neutral in your coverage. One of the greatest challenges in objective journalism is in covering multiple sides of a controversy without indicating which one you agree with. If the audience can't tell, you're Switzerland, baby. You've stayed neutral. You've kept it down the middle.
and you are an objective journalist.
On behalf of CNN 10 and AT&T's Youth Voices Collective, I'm Carl Azus.
How do you stay objective in that situation as a journalist?
Well, I think it begins with the answer that no journalist can be totally objective, totally unbiased, every day, in every way, on every story. That the test of a journalist of integrity is over a reasonable length of time, how hard does he or she try to keep their own biases out, and how do they succeed? The critical point comes, and you've touched on it, when, as a journalist, you see something happening, you say to yourself, you know what, I'm a journalist, but I'm an American, I'm a citizen, I'm a father, I'm a brother, and this is outrageous, this is not compatible with my conscience. That's the test point of you're trying to stay objective and try to stay unbiased. But, you know, as a lifetime journalist, I can say, I can only speak for myself, you do the best you can, realizing you're going to make your mistakes. But sort of prizing those moments when you have said to yourself, you know, I've got to quit saying that I'm going to deal in false equivalency. It's one of the great dangers of journalism, false equivalency. Well, there's just as many voices on this side as there are on this. Giving airtime to mass shooters is something that journalists, for the length and breadth of my career, long before we got into this most recent run of school shootings, as far back as the 60s and 70s, for example, the Kennedy assassination, how much attention to give Lee Harvey Oswald. This is an ongoing conversation with journalists for which we haven't come up with an answer. There is something to be said, I do think, for individual journalist's conscience. Just rather than just wait for the station manager or the network head to say, we have a new policy about mass shooters. We're going to show the picture of the shooter once and only once. We're going to mention his name only 3 times, and that's going to be it. These kinds of ethical standards put into print or trying to standardize the approach in the past haven't worked very well. So there's something said for an individual journalist to say, you know, on my program or on my beat, with a mass shooter, I'll mention his name once and then move on. Or on my program, I'm not going to show his picture. Now, you may catch hell from the news director or the station manager or the network owner, but that kind of individual responsibility is probably the best we can hope for. And that when one does it, another may notice kind of quietly, you know, David is not putting on his program a shooter. I don't want to raise any false expectations, because the competitive drive, yes, for ratings and audience and subscription, usually carries the day in news. Now, as for giving airtime to mass shooters, I do feel strongly about this. This is something that needs to be addressed quite quickly. That I take a back seat to no man or woman in wanting to break stories. You know, part of my job is to be a story hunter, be a story breaker, as well as a storyteller. But there is a time, again, when conscience has to dictate. And giving airtime, unless it's part of a concentrated effort by those for, say, in a hostage situation, or the mass shooter is holed up somewhere, and someone in law enforcement said, listen, we need to keep him talking. That's a different situation. I'm afraid I haven't answered your question all too well, but you know, there are some questions of professional ethics and standards and your own conscience, which you just have to keep reviewing in your own head from time to time.
Gary, welcome back. I put you on mute because there's a little bit of background noise coming from your end. No problem. And there are a couple of questions for you. And there is one specific that came directly to me. So let me just read that because you might not have seen it in the chat.
Happy to talk about that.
Yeah, here is the question. What advice can you share to Guyanese media and journalists about calling someone, ask a one-line question, then clip a photo of the person from the internet and put it in that headline of the big article, padded with a lot of what was not said by the person, giving the readers the false impression that it's the person in the photo is related to the whole article?
Let me actually answer that in a couple different parts, because I did. So there's a couple excellent questions in the chat. Excellent questions. Let me just say, what we do is not easy, right? And when I talk about pure journalism, one of the reasons I use pure is because I can make an acronym out of it. But there was a question asked about activist journalism. And the question is, as journalists, is it our job to, Jerry, you mentioned about being an agent of change. Public relations tries to change the dial so that people look at their company favorably. Journalists, I think, have to present information. And what has happened in our world is things have become what we call hyper-partisan. You've got papers on the right, you've got papers on the left. This is true in Canada, this is true in every country. This newspaper I know is going to lean towards this way politically, this newspaper is going to lean towards this way. Fox News in the States, for example, has a bad reputation. CNN, like I don't watch CNN regularly anyways. And some of the stuff I've seen, well, not just on CNN, but there was a clear hatred of Donald Trump. And I'm like, as a journalist, that really surprised me, because I always tried to, like, you don't want people to know how you vote. Does that make sense? If you're doing your job properly, people won't really know which way you lean. This is what I think, this is my best advice to each of you. Be a person of integrity. If someone gives you too much change at Disney, give it back, right? Don't take the sandwich. And if you get a gift at Christmas, mail it back as well. I do not want to be that person. The other thing is, like that newspaper person in the small town who just kept doing a great job, eventually they were elevated. And if you phone a government organization or the question, I guess, was about, was it an oil and gas company? Official confirmation on issues is hard to get. Politicians are biased. This is absolutely the case. I'm going to talk a bit more about this in part 2 when we talk about data journalism, about working as a team. But honestly, it's about working together and just coming at it from different angles. Maybe work with other journalists, maybe work with newspapers that the government does talk to. The other thing too is when you say in an article like this person had no comment, that can be quite, that says a lot, right? Or the government, they wouldn't talk about it. They would not confirm this, right? This is what they're saying, but this is not, we cannot confirm this information. And Kitty, ask me the question again. Just reread that question so I know exactly what the.
Yes, of course. So the question is, what advice can you share to the Guyanese media and journalists about calling someone, ask a one-line question, then clip a photo of that person from the internet and put it in the headline of a big article padded with a lot of what was not said by the person, giving the readers the false impression that it's the person in the photo who is related to the whole article?
Yeah, well, don't do that. I think the problem is that there's a pressure to make a story bigger than it is, or to appear bigger than it is. People are not stupid. People are not stupid. They are not. They know that this person is just not telling the truth, or it's sort of like that: fool me once, shame on me; or shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. I don't know if you've heard that saying. The idea is, I might believe you the first time, but then if I read the article, we all know what clickbait is. Have you ever done that where you click on something, you say, oh, look, I want to see, you can get a car for $200. Well, look at all these surplus cars. And you click on it and it's garbage, like it's just complete lies. You stop doing that. You stop going to that source because you know it's not real. And I think the thing is, this is what I would say: publish what you know and what you can prove. The other thing is that you have to realize, and I think you do, it's in the government's, everybody's best interest. And there's a reason that companies put on press conferences, because they want their information out there. What has happened with Donald Trump this week, and I saw this, is Facebook has, I guess, kicked him off there now. They've suspended his account. And Twitter, they've suspended, a long time ago, he lost his Twitter account. So basically, they shut down all of the channels, as far as I know, right? And so now he can't tweet out, he can't go on Facebook. There's no way for him to disseminate his comments. And as a journalist, if everybody, let's say the government put, or whoever, let's say an industry puts something out that's, and if they won't verify it, then don't publish it, right? Or build a story in such a way that people know it's not verified. The key with this week is transparency. Transparency. You can even say, the government, this is what they put out, right? But they wouldn't speak to us. They wouldn't confirm it, and let people make their own conclusion by that, right? If there's no response from the government, it says something, I think, right? But yes, I know it's hard and it takes time to build up your audience. Like maybe you're just, a freelancer and you're working on stuff, and because you're freelance, you need to, sell stories, but the story, integrity is fine if you have a pension or money coming in. It's much more difficult when you're trying to sell a story to put food on the table. And you're like, you know what, if I write this story, I know I can get money for it. I guess I would almost say, if that's the case, then take a part-time job, like if you can, or, somebody just told me this week, if you have any kind of degree, you can teach English in China online, and they'll just pay you, to teach English to Chinese students, right? I would do that as opposed to violating my integrity. So now so what you know about me is that when I was a kid, I ripped Disney World off. I took too much change back. So that's a strike against me. But what I will tell you is I learned my lesson, and I no longer do that. And I'm in fact, recently, and I tell you this just to show you this, I bought a bunch of stuff at Walmart and I self-checked out a bunch of stuff. And when I got to to my car, I realized one of the things in my cart I hadn't scanned, I hadn't paid for it. And it was only a couple dollar item, but I took it back and I gave it to the security guard and I said, this didn't get paid for, so I'll get it the next time, because my honesty is worth more than $2, right? And the other thing is, as you become known, what you want to do is develop a reputation. When people see and talk to you, they know that, because stories will come your way. That's the other thing. Once you establish a reputation as a reputable journalist, people will come to see you, right? They will absolutely come to bring you the story, because they know you won't compromise, and you won't make stuff up, and you won't just toe the line. I want to show you, we're going to go about, we'll go another 5 minutes, then we'll take a break. And then I'm also happy to stick around and answer questions specific if you have any. What am I going to show you? I'm going to show you the poll. I don't know if any of you did the poll that they put out yesterday. I have many things open. Let's see. Sorry, just bear with me. It's here. There it is there. Okay, so let's look at this. This is important. So it's important because this is you. All right. So this is, can you all see that? So this
yes,
is
we
from,
can.
okay, so good. Thank you. So this, let's see if this will let me go through. Okay, it will. Let me just go back to, okay, so, let me see if I'm doing this right. Does it go to 6? Okay, so these are some of the questions. Who do you trust when it comes to information about the gas and oil industry? All right. So media, right there, got 7. But the extractive industry transparency issue got more. You know why? Because the whole idea of transparent. Let's be honest and straight up about this. And this is a good sign. Like this shows you where people believe. Government, only one person actually, and maybe it was some, listen, if you believe it, that's fine. And some said none. So one person believed the government. 5 people said none of you, which is a pretty high number. Again, 3 here, trusted. So government does a little better on the mining, right? Media does quite well on all of these answers, I think, right? Trust the least, right? Boom, 10 to the government. But look at this number. It's almost the same number. 7 believe they trust information. Who do they believe the least? The media. And the reason they believe the media the least, I think, and you can answer this because this is your survey. Let me actually stop sharing. Is because people become a mouthpiece for the government. And one of the things with pure journalism is you do not want to take a side. You want people to not, you want to say, here's this, here's this. So the question was asked about the activist journalism. I guess as long as you're clear on what you're doing, the problem is once you go to the, I'm not going to call it the dark side. I don't mean it like that. But once you go that way, you're committed. From now on, that's who you are. Like that. Yeah, like it's sort of like in the film business. I taught some film courses. They said you're only as good as your last film, or you're only as good as your last movie, right? Because if your movie busts the next time, people won't want to hire you. And one of the things that we're talking about with pure journalism, let me just yeah, we'll come back to I'll just show the rest of the slides at the end because I'm almost done that part. But the idea is build a reputation. There was a movie a few years back, a number of years now, Field of Dreams, where Kevin Costner builds a baseball diamond in his cornfield. And he hears his voice. It says, if you build it, they will come. And eventually in this cornfield baseball, a diamond, it's kind of a weird movie, but all these ghost baseball players show up and they play baseball, all like Babe Ruth, and everybody shows up at his cornfield to play, right? And the idea is, if you develop a reputation as a reputable journalist, people will actually say, even if you say, okay, I'm just going to write a blog. This is the beautiful thing with the world we live in. The bad side is there's lots of voices. The good side is there's lots of voices. So now you don't need a newspaper and you don't need a printing press. A laptop and a coffee shop is just fine, but you don't want to misrepresent things. You don't want to put one photograph up and then with one quote from somebody. And then, I'll tell you this. When I did my PhD, I was researching and I needed some interviews. So I interviewed a bunch of actors and costume designers, that kind of stuff. But Harrison Ford, the actor, I wanted to interview him. So I reached out to his people and they were very kind, but they basically said, sorry, he's too busy. But when I was in Toronto, this goes exactly to the point about one line. I went to a film premiere that he was at. And so as he was signing autographs, I asked him a question, the question I wanted to ask him, which he responded to. So I have a one-line quote from Harrison Ford in my dissertation. But I also know too, it's not a lot. Like it was one line that speaks to one point, but I didn't blow it out too much. You know what I mean? I spent hours talking to other people. That's where I built my story, around the people where I can ask more than one question. And we'll talk about interviews after the break. But there is no easy answer. The problem is we live in a world that is changing. And you know what, Jerry, is it wrong to take a position? You know, the only problem is you're now taking a position. And the other thing is, then once you get known as being an activist journalist, then the government's like, well, we're not going to send that aid. We're not talking to those people. Look at Donald Trump. Like, he stopped talking to the CNN. He just didn't like what they had to say. So he just turned off the channel. Oh, fake news. That's alternative news. That's just not real. And the problem is, you know, everybody believes something, right? Even if it's not true, because they say, oh, I saw it on TV, it must be real, you know? But yeah, so let's actually pause there. Let's come back at 3 o'clock if we can. It's about 15 minutes, about that.